Before anything else, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, leave a like, share this video with someone who needs to hear this, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my place. Because today, I'm opening up about a part of my life I never thought I'd have the courage to reveal. You think cheating only happens in bad marriages? Let me tell you something. Sometimes, the most intense infidelity story begins right where love exists, wrapped in routine and silence. And what you're about to hear isn't fiction. It's real as the look in my husband's best friend's eyes that night. As real as the guilt that still haunts me. As real as what almost happened and what didn't. Yes, I consoled my husband's best friend. But what seemed harmless turned into something I still struggle to define. The unspoken words. The touches that weren't supposed to mean anything. The confusion between emotional need and desire. The kind of forbidden confession of infidelity no one ever dares to say out loud. But I will, because maybe, just maybe, you'll see yourself in this story too. And before you judge me, take a deep breath, because the truth about infidelity and cheating isn't always black and white. And by the time you reach the end, you might just discover something about your own heart. So lean in and come with me, because this is my real story of infidelity, and it might just shake you to your core. It started like any other evening, except this one wasn't. Mike showed up at the door without warning, with that usual grin of his, saying Dan was stuck at work. It felt harmless at first. You know, two people making small talk while waiting for the man of the house. But the air felt different. Not wrong, not right, just loaded. Something shifted, and I couldn't quite place it. He sat on the couch like he belonged there. Like he'd always belonged. I laughed at something silly he said, and the way his eyes lingered on me, it wasn't innocent. And I noticed. The kind of noticing that sends a quiet rush through your body, even if you pretend you didn't feel it. That moment lingered, like the first drop of rain before the storm. This wasn't just small talk anymore. You know those little moments that don't look like much, but feel like everything? That's exactly what this was. His compliments didn't sound like friendly banter. They came dressed in velvet and tension. And my reactions, though subtle, betrayed me. I smiled a little too long, sat a little too close. Noticing turned into responding. And in a strange way, I didn't want it to stop. It's scary how quickly something innocent can drift into dangerous territory. One minute, I was thinking about dinner. The next, I was wondering what it would feel like if he reached for my hand. It's in these quiet, forbidden moments that infidelity stories are born. Real ones. The kind no one talks about, but so many live. And what was just a visit was becoming something far more complicated. I tried to play it cool, I really did. But as we kept talking, my body betrayed me. The way I leaned in, how I tucked my hair behind my ear, the soft laugh that escaped me, it all said more than I intended. And Mike, he wasn't missing a thing. His eyes met mine not like a friend's, but like someone who saw me. Really saw me. And I couldn't remember the last time Dan looked at me like that. There's something intoxicating about feeling noticed. Not just for how you look, but for how you exist. I was aware of every breath, every word. Mike wasn't doing anything obvious. He wasn't crossing any clear lines, but the intimacy in his gaze pulled me into a place I hadn't visited in years. It wasn't just attraction. It was the ache of being emotionally starved and suddenly offered a feast. You know, people think cheating stories are always about lust, but real infidelity, true infidelity stories, they often begin like this. With two people who were never meant to connect that way, but do. Slowly, silently. And it's not the body that betrays first, it's the heart. That night, my heart had questions. Questions I didn't dare answer out loud, but they were there, pounding. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just a harmless moment. But then why did I keep glancing at his hands? Why did I feel butterflies when he leaned in, whispering something about how Dan was lucky? It was in those moments, between glances and unsaid words, that I realized something was shifting inside me. A forbidden confession was blooming, and I wasn't sure I could stop it from growing. From that point on, it was like walking a tightrope between reality and a dream I didn't know I wanted. Mike didn't have to say anything bold. His presence alone was magnetic. Every compliment he whispered felt like a secret just for me. When his hand brushed against mine, accidentally, or so it seemed, it sent a spark up my spine. I didn't move away. That's when I knew something inside me had shifted. We weren't doing anything wrong yet, but everything about the way we looked at each other said otherwise. The emotional intimacy was growing stealthily, like ivy wrapping around a tree. It's funny how the most dangerous connections don't scream, they whisper. And I was listening to every single one of those whispers, letting them seep into the cracks of a marriage I didn't realize had so many. I've read infidelity stories before. Watched the confession of cheating unfold on those late-night YouTube rabbit holes. I never thought I'd be one of them. But now I understand how infidelity and cheating start. With need. Emotional need. And when someone finally meets that need, even if it's the wrong person, even if it's just for a moment, it feels right. That's the trap. It feels right. I kept asking myself, what am I doing? But the truth? I didn't want it to stop. Mike leaned closer, talking softly, our knees barely touching. And in that fragile silence, I didn't pull away. I leaned in too, not with my body, but with my soul. That was the real betrayal. Not the physical touch, but the permission I gave myself to feel. And once you cross that invisible line, there's no going back the same. We were sitting there, side by side, watching the game. But let's be honest, neither of us were really watching. The screen flickered, the crowd cheered, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. Mike shifted slightly, his arm brushing against mine, and he didn't move it away. It was subtle, calculated. His presence felt heavier, warmer, inviting, and I didn't have the strength to pretend it didn't affect me. His fingers gently grazed my arm as he reached for the remote. Innocent? Maybe. But my body didn't read it that way. That small touch was electric, and it ignited something I had buried for years, something that scared me. I felt my defenses crumble, piece by piece. I kept telling myself, you're a married woman. But at that moment, that identity didn't protect me. It only made the guilt more intense. It's strange how guilt and desire can exist side by side, like two shadows under the same light. I wanted to push him away. I wanted to get up and walk out of the room. But instead, I sat there, quiet, still, and painfully aware of every inch between us. I've seen so many cheating stories begin this way. And suddenly, I wasn't just reading an infidelity story Reddit post. I was living it. His hand lingered on my knee just a second too long, and I didn't stop him. My breath caught in my throat, and I knew if he leaned in just an inch more, I wouldn't have had the strength to stop it. My heart was split between everything I believed and everything I felt. And that right there was the moment I realized I was standing at a crossroads. But life doesn't always wait for you to choose. And just when it felt like we were both teetering on the edge of something irreversible, Mike pulled away. No words, no explanations. Just a shift in posture, a sudden coldness where there was once heat. He stared at the TV, pretending to care, while my entire body throbbed with the ache of an almost sin. That withdrawal hit me harder than any kiss would have. It left me suspended in midair. I didn't know if I should be relieved or disappointed. Maybe both. The tension didn't vanish. It just changed shape. It wasn't about what almost happened anymore. It was about what didn't. And sometimes, the silence after the storm is louder than the thunder itself. I sat there trying to act normal, but inside, I was anything but. That couch suddenly felt like a confession booth. Dan came home shortly after, unaware of everything, smiling, tired, full of casual affection and routine. And I played my part, the loyal wife, the devoted partner. But something had cracked inside me, and no amount of routine could seal it back. This wasn't just about cheating. It was about something much deeper. Something I hadn't faced in years. My own loneliness. I went to bed that night pretending to sleep while Dan kissed my forehead. My thoughts swirled in a loop. Memories of glances, of touches, of restraint. Infidelity stories don't always end in a kiss. Sometimes they end in silence, and that silence can be louder than any act. But as I lay there, wide awake, one thing echoed louder than everything else. Why didn't I stop it sooner? I spent the rest of the night avoiding eye contact with Mike. I kept my distance, said only what was necessary, and forced smiles that didn't reach my eyes. Dan, sweet and unsuspecting, talked about his stressful day while I nodded, half present. But inside me, something had shifted. I couldn't stop replaying those moments. Not just what happened, but what almost did. That was the part one couldn't shake off. It's wild how an evening that started like any other could unravel so many threads you thought were tightly stitched. I've always believed that love could withstand anything. But now I wondered, was I really in love or just attached to the idea of it? Because what I felt when Mike looked at me, touched me, saw me, it awakened something raw, something long forgotten, something dangerous. I told myself I was just lonely, just tired, just emotionally drained. But the truth is, this wasn't about Mike. It was about me, about the parts of me I buried to keep the peace, about the quiet infidelities of the heart that go unnoticed, yet still count. And this story of infidelity, this real-life confession of cheating in silence, it's not just about a man or a moment. It's about emotional hunger. As I lay in bed that night, Dan sleeping peacefully beside me, my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Do I love him? Yes. But do I feel seen? Do I feel wanted? The questions hung in the air like ghosts. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. Not because of Mike, but because of what Mike exposed. And once a truth like that surfaces, it doesn't just go away. So now I ask you, how many times have you felt emotionally invisible in a relationship? How many little moments have you brushed aside, convincing yourself they meant nothing when deep down, you knew they did? This wasn't just a story about cheating. It was a mirror, a reflection of all the ways we quietly betray ourselves before we ever betray anyone else. What are you suppressing right now just to keep the peace? What emotional hunger are you pretending not to feel? These aren't just questions, they're wake-up calls. Because stories like mine aren't rare. They're just rarely told. And maybe, just maybe, the real betrayal isn't crossing the line, it's ignoring that the line exists in the first place. Apply this knowledge to your own life. Start asking the hard questions. Look closely at your emotional needs, your relationships, your silences. Because transformation doesn't start with someone else, it starts with you. And sometimes, the greatest act of loyalty is being honest with yourself first. If this story made you think, feel, or even reflect for a second, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with me as we continue diving deep into the truths most people are too afraid to speak out loud. And don't forget, leave your comment below.